Let's see, is this on? Is this working? It is working. And people are joining. Hello. My name is Nikita Gill, and I have taken I've taken over the Waterstones account today for National Poetry Day, and we are going to be doing, in fact, a wonderful, wonderful end to National Poetry Day by talking to an incredibly powerful performance poet, Sanah. Hi!
Hello. I've joined. Have I joined too early? I think I might have.
No,
Sorry.
no, no, no. No, you didn't. You didn't. I basically was just introducing myself, and I've taken over the Waterstones account all day today, so they probably know my face by now.
Oh, it's so nice to see your face. It's been so long.
I know it has been this has been such a strange year. Um,
Yeah.
I think we last met in January when you did the audiobook for Slam.
Yes. I know. It feels like a lifetime ago now, honestly.
Indeed. I am just going to do this so that we can concentrate. How have you been?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right actually. I think it's been like a real mix of different feelings over the last couple of months. I don't even know where to start. I've just been finishing my doctorate, um, so I'm officially qualified. I can call myself a doctor now, which is really really weird.
So I should
Officially
have
a clinical.
introduced you as Dr. Sana, not like. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so now I'm officially a qualified clinical psychologist, which is pretty amazing. But my head's been deep in the academic space
Wow.
for the last couple of months. So definitely feeling a sense of real relief coming away from that. Yeah. But how are you? How is your heart? How are you doing?
Oh, I love that you asked that. How is your heart? I could give you a hug. But this is how poets talk to each other, isn't it? We get right to the deep stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm okay. It's been
yeah.
a funny old year, but poetry's been keeping me alive. Today has been a really lovely day. Hats off to the National Poetry Day team and like all the ambassadors and like everyone and all the partners and Waterstones because they've made it a really warm day. And it's just
Mm,
you know how it is usually for us on National Poetry Day. It's like our Christmas. So we're usually out
mm.
and we're doing things and we're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
events and it's just not been like that. So it's a bit
yeah,
yeah, but they managed to do it like virtually, all of it. So I've been busy all day, which I wasn't expecting at all.
yeah. It's also publication day for you, which is
Yes.
massive. Massive congratulations. How are you feeling about
Oh,
it?
good. Good.
Yeah.
I think I had like it's too really too. So in the US, the book came out 2 days ago. Sorry, I'm stuttering a bit. And the book came out today in the UK. So it feels
Mm,
like it's been like a 3 day long release, which has been good. I've been really busy. It's been really lovely to see how
yeah,
readers are responding to the book because I was really nervous.
yeah. I can
But
imagine.
what we're here to talk about today is you and slam.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's such a honestly, it's an honor to be featured in it amongst so many incredible other poets. So yeah, just thank you for including me in
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're an incredible poet, so of course you were going to be in a
it.
book full of incredible poets. The whole concept behind slam is
Mm,
the quintessential introduction to modern poetry, but also to the magical world of what performance poetry is, and the
mm,
amount of like I say this in the book, but all poetry is real poetry. And
mm,
there is a certain kind of elitism and snobbery around poetry, which goes stage poets, page poets, instant poets,
mm,
which serves as a way of dividing us and kind of deciding what actual poetry is. So the truth is, if
mm.
you write poetry, you are a poet, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think like the beautiful thing about performance is that the poet has an added skill of being able to stand up there and just completely take the audience away with their work and just their words,
Mm,
which I think is a incredible ability and it's such a skill. And as someone who spent so much time watching slam poets, watching performance poets, sorry, kind of do their thing, it was incredibly inspiring to me. I'm quite introverted and I couldn't really do it. I couldn't really do that. And I was just constantly in awe of the way and the way that it was done and how magical it was in the work.
Mm.
I watched your TED talk, and I was sitting in the green room, and I remember like sitting over there, kind of watching you like this in awe, performing all of your poems. Like I shushed a bunch of strangers, by the way. I had no idea who those people were, and I was like, "Who's doing my dua is love? I need to hear."
You know what's funny is that I'm just sitting here thinking, you're saying this like you couldn't do it, but then I also watched yours, and it was such a magical experience to witness and to be in that space. I think you're just a bit of a goddess on stage, and I think like we could definitely feel that in the room. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think like you can own that you can also do that. You can definitely captivate and hold an audience. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think it is a very different experience being in a room and being carried by the spoken word
Right.
than just the individual connection that you're carried through by the page. It's a very, very different experience.
Yeah.
And not to sort of invalidate or take anything away from the beauty and divinity in page poetry.
Yeah.
I think both are different, very spiritual forms of inviting us to be present,
Yes.
And to awaken to life, to awaken to the divine or to God, or whatever language you use for it. But I do think there's something for me that I really value in the utterance of word,
Yes.
that just brings, it holds an opportunity for connection in speaking something.
Right.
You bring it to life.
Yeah.
And I think also, for me, like as a psychologist, I'm always really interested in the therapeutic aspects of things,
Right.
and through speaking, I think what you do is there's something that language does to offer a container for emotion.
Right.
And in the delivery and the speaking and the performance of poetry, you might be carrying so much of what is unsaid for other people in that room.
Yeah.
So it's not just your own individual sort of cathartic processing, but you might be doing that for other people just through the shared process of listening and sharing that space with each other. So there's that too. Sorry, I've kind of gone off a bit there, but yeah, there's so much in the spoken form, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I think there's so many people who say that they are listeners who are poets, right? Like they say they're also listeners. They're not just readers. They're not just practitioners. They're also listeners, because so much of poetry is just sitting there and listening to the cadence of the words as, and hearing a poem in a poet's voice is a completely different experience than when you read it, and I think that's the magic. That's the magic, because you're hearing the truth in the poet's voice. And
Definitely.
I said this today: a poet's voice is their power, and a poet's voice is their truth, and that is why poets' voices deserve to be protected.
Definitely.
But one of the questions I wanted to ask you was,
Sure.
how did you come to poetry? I'm always curious to know how poets come into poetry.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I think my journey is maybe a bit different. I listened to a lot of rap and hip hop in my house. My brother played a lot of hip hop, and I don't think I had a conscious understanding of that actually being poetry. But I had a really early ear for lyrics.
Yeah.
So I knew all of the Tupac albums off by heart, and the Eminem and stuff like that, just at a very young age, like early teens. And then my first poetry book was The Rose That Grew from Concrete, which is Tupac's poetry book. And I just started, through my brother actually, like finding his lyrics and what his writing was. I started doing it myself, like around like 13 or 14, and just, never shared it for years and years. Didn't really share it with anyone. Just was an exercise, probably of like therapeutic processing for me, but I didn't have the language to call it that then. And then I saw this advert in my 20s. I think I was 25, for Words First. I don't know if you've heard of it, which is a BBC scheme looking for spoken word poets. And I just thought, fuck it, let me see what happens. And I filmed a selfie video of me. It's the first time I've shared my poetry, and entered, got chosen. Absolutely mad. Like was amongst just so many talented people that were doing this full time as a career. And my first ever performance was on the BBC Rep stage, and I was shitting myself, you know. But that was, I guess, that for me was the entry into even realizing that there was a world of poetry, that this was, you know, that spoken word was actually something that I could choose to follow as a career.
Yeah.
And that's when it, you know, when it started and just opened doors for me. And then I started, you know, circling the open mic scene and just getting more and more opportunities from there, really.
And what's
Yeah.
really brilliant is that, can you tell people a little bit about what you do, like as a psychologist? Like, what are you interested in? Just because I think it ties in very well to poetry.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, oof, what do I do as a psychologist? I think for me, it, you know, working psychologically underneath it, for me, and I think people will define what psychology is very differently, but for me, it's very much about love in action and
Yes.
connection,
Yeah.
and that is at the core of healing for all of us. I think, you know, to be seen and heard and held in our suffering, unconditionally, you know. And I think how that ties in to me for poetry is poetry offers a medium for that too, but through language and through word.
That's exactly
um
it. Yeah.
and I think as well, you know, a big part of my own individual journey has been cultivating self-compassion. You know,
Yes.
I'm queer, I'm Muslim, I'm Pakistani. I've been through a lot of experiences of exile and rejection and shame, and it's things that I'm still working with and still carrying. And cultivating acceptance and self-compassion is a journey, you know. And I think poetry and psychology and all of these things align, offer a medium to actually rewrite a narrative for yourself that is accepting, that is compassionate, to move away from internalized shameful narratives to more loving and compassionate ones,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. I
And I just,
completely agree.
yeah, no, go on. Sorry, Nikita.
No, I
Go
just said
on.
I completely agree. Like
Yeah.
everything you're saying, I'm just like, oh my God, yes, like 100% with you. But like you said it so much more eloquently than I could ever put it, you know? I just am constantly like, I could listen to Sanah talk for like hours and hours and hours because she just is, she talks from such a place of love. And I think one of the things about
Mm,
poetry is coming from a place of love is so important to poets, you know, um,
mm,
when we hold each other's work as well, we need to hold them with the love and respect that it deserves, and carry it with the peace that it deserves. And I think that's what slam was about, is kind of honoring the
mm.
work of all of these poets who I love and admire, and who I think that more people should read and more people should know. And of course, we had like
Yes.
brilliant guest stars like Dean Atta and Sophia Tucker, who were like
Mm,
brilliant. And then we had yourself and we had Duranka Pereira. And these poems are so full of passion. Like, I swear, when
mm.
just the book is such an experience, isn't it? It's such an
Oh,
experience.
such an experience. You know, I just wanted to come back to a point that you made earlier on about sometimes the elitism of the poetry world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that isn't to take away from the beautiful poetry that is published and recognized and is award winning, and people that have worked to get that recognition. But there are unbelievable poets that are circling the spoken word scene in London, and maybe prior to the pandemic, because we're not getting as much movement and
Yeah.
those spaces aren't as existent at the moment. But you know, that aren't as well read, haven't reached those prizes, haven't penetrated those bubbles yet. And I think, you know, this collection is giving voice and platform to some of those incredibly talented poets.
Right.
One of the poets that you've included in the connection is Tanaka Fuego, who like, oof, absolutely blows me away every time I see him perform.
Yeah.
Like, it is an embodied experience.
Yes.
Honestly, he moves like shivers through my body, and he really speaks with unbelievable like courage, honesty, and if you know him, he's very loving and just has a really beautiful energy. And yeah, it's just amazing to see his work platformed and voiced. And I think, you know, God willing, he's only going to enter those bubbles and get that recognition in those spaces too. But it's just really, really amazing that this book is including voices like him.
Yeah.
You know,
That was really important to me. So I feel like every single poet in this book, a few of them have their own books, but like everyone
yeah,
deserves their own book,
for
because
sure.
they're such important voices, and the things
Mm,
that are being spoken about are so, so important. The book is divided into 6 sections, and those sections cover everything from kin to home to duality to desire,
mm.
you know,
Acceptance.
it's exactly
Yeah, yeah,
acceptance,
yeah.
and it covers so much, and each, and it's such a short book, that
Mm, mm.
so many people have said to me that, oh my God, I wanted more. And I'm just like, well, you probably get more, because the aim is to make sure everybody is able to get their own book, you know.
Yeah.
So that would be, because that the reason you're left wanting more is because these
Yeah.
poets are so, so good. Um,
Mm, mm.
I would absolutely love and be very, very honored if you could do either a reading or performance of My Dua is Love for us.
Yes, of course. I'd love to. I'd love to. Um, sure. I mean, should I say a little bit about the piece as
Yes.
well?
Yes. Yeah.
So for everyone who's listening, dua translates into prayer. Um, so the translation of the title is "My Prayer is Love," and I wrote this piece. It's actually about a year ago now, just over a year ago, and I spoke to this earlier. Really navigating this path of self-acceptance and self-compassion, especially around my sexuality, and I guess coming to a place of really being able to call myself an Muslim and queer, and really meet some of that shame that I was carrying for years and years with love and acceptance. And I think part of that comes through in this poem, and really also speaks to love, between two South Asian women. So that's a little bit of context around it. But yeah, so I'll share with you. Um, I am learning that the desire is not dirty, that I need not pray myself clean, that shame need not shove me to my knees, forehead to Zameen, to bring me closer to my deen. My dua is love. My dua is love. It pours pure, like Zamzam, through my body, through her body, through my body, through her body. We are holy. We are holy in liquid sighs and sweat-soaked skin. I cannot tell where she ends and I begin, as love interweaves through estuaries of limb in this tapestry of brown. It is not a sin. It is not a sin, instead, a call to prayer. It is a call to prayer whenever my name leaves her lips with devotion. I know that God is here. Whenever I am with her, I know that God is here.
Oh, Sanah! Actual chills. Actual chills. Like, I'm so
Oh.
honored to have watched you perform. I feel like it's just for me. I feel like you just performed just for me. I like I saw you perform this on the TEDx Women platform, and like I said, I
Mm.
shook strangers so that like I could hear it properly. Um, but now I feel like there is so much cadence in the way that this is what I mean about poetry, right? It is definitely a
Mm.
song without music, because when you hear it in
Mm.
the poet's voice, they
Mm.
speak it like it's a song,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so many of the poems in this book, when I heard them, so I selected them without actually hearing quite a few of them performed,
Mm.
because these were sent like paper entries basically, even though I had heard the poets perform other pieces. These particular poems, a
Mm.
few of them I hadn't heard performed, and then we had the
Mm.
audiobook, and we got into the studio, and I finally heard a few of these poems actually performed, and it just changed the meaning for me. When you heard
Yeah.
the depth in the voice, when you heard the way that it's like when you go to an opera for the first time, or you hear classical music and you hear the way the crescendo and all the ups and downs,
Mm.
and that's what I feel like poetry does for me, hearing it in the poet's voice. um,
Yeah. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today just about the difference between prayer that's said in your head and prayer out loud, you know, the utterance of prayer, and when you actually speak it out loud in conversation with God, you know, or whatever that is for you, there is something very different. And I think even in just the utterance of word, it becomes more embodied,
Yes,
you
yes,
know, and it lands not only in the other's body, but also it moves from your body. You're more aware of your heartbeat, you know, the tone of your voice, how it leaves your throat. It's just in a more embodied, present way of being with the word.
yes.
So I think there's a lot of beauty in that. Um,
So
but
true.
yeah, yeah.
So true. I think absolutely right. And I think one of the beautiful things about kind of like this book as well is how many different types of voices that it brought together. So what
Mm,
like you see at a performance poetry event at a slam, you see so many different diverse experiences and voices brought together, right? Like no two
mm,
poets are alike, no two
mm,
poets experience the same thing, and no two
mm,
poets have written like the same poem. So
mm, mm, mm,
you're there and you're going through this really rich tapestry like of or this rich experience of human experiences from everything from like suffering to joy to prayer to like love
mm,
to, and it's incredible how nuanced the human experience is when you actually think about it, because
mm,
relatability is one thing, like we all go through like certain experiences as human beings, but
mm.
the degrees to which those experiences affect us, that's what you can see in poetry.
Yes,
um
for sure.
yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I think as well, there's something about the medium of poetry that allows an open-heartedness, you know, where it lands in your heart in a way that the other forms of communication don't in the same way, you know. I was just thinking back to a couple of weeks ago. So I'm a psychologist. I was saying earlier, I had to, you know, there's a thing called the British Psychological Society, right, which is like a conference for academics in the
Yes.
psychological world. So a lot of the engagement in that space is very much at like an academic, intellectual level. People are speaking, you know, from their minds. And I shared a poem on it called "Decolonizing Distress," which is basically looking really at, pull it back, but basically deconstructing whiteness in the way that we understand our experiences of suffering, you
Yes.
know, demedicalizing our experiences of suffering. But I shared it through a poem, right? This piece.
Wow.
And there was just something about, I think, how that landed that offered something more emotive. And I know earlier you were speaking about the varied emotions in the book. And
Yes.
there's something as well about how we communicate emotively that allows a connection to be slightly different and move beyond the intellectual space, you know,
Like.
disrupt the elitism, disrupt the intellectual defenses to land in the heart. And I just wanted to use that example as well, because I think there's a lot in how we can break bubbles of whiteness, especially in this time, you know,
Yes.
that we're living in,
Yes.
you know, spaces like academia with this medium, this tool to elicit connection and you know, being with each other's heart beyond the mind.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's a lot in using poetry to do that, and I think the book offers that in its own way,
Yeah.
you know.
It certainly encourages empathy and it encourages people to engage. Poetry does encourage people to engage with it empathetically, right? Like that's the biggest.
Mm,
And I think that's the thing that I love about it, is that it makes human beings recognize the power of experience, the power of individuality with a few words, um, and kind of realize just how deep human emotions go and how different we are
mm,
from each other and how we experience things. And because of that, it encourages this kind of empathy, which um, I can see in literature, I can see in fiction, but because you're actually either sitting there watching the poet perform, or it's like the
mm.
experience of just reading like a page, 2 pages, it kind of is a distilled experience on a completely different level, you know?
Yes, yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I think as well, what there is right now when we're in this real proximity to death, you know, I think in the pandemic we're all having to really face like a lot of fear, a lot of confronting as to what you know, what life is about, what it all means. What poetry offers as well is a way to actually awaken to what is here. And I
Mm,
think what, you know, what you were saying there in terms of awaken to our difference,
yes.
awaken to our individuality, but also our belonging with each other. You
Right.
know, underneath all of that, like, yes, there is difference, but we also all belong to each other.
Yeah.
And especially in these times, you know, where we are also we're facing disconnection in a way we've never faced it before. You know,
Exactly.
we might be going into another even harder lockdown in the UK, and what that means for us. How can we find mediums of connection through that?
Yes.
This book is a way of is one way of doing that. You know, feeling connection through words, through poetry. It's such an important medium and tool.
That's so true. You know, I think I really, so the thing is, this year, I think so many people have struggled with their mental health. I
Mm,
think this has been a hard year for everyone. I don't know anyone who's had an easy lockdown. I don't know anyone who's had an easy 2020. I think all of us are so connected in this experience of something terrible happening. And like you said, proximity to death. And like
mm,
also watching people you love suffer, you know, on
yeah.
a scale that you've never actually had to watch them suffer, or like,
Mm,
you know, and that connects us, that connects you to so many different people, because it's just like we're all on varying degrees, of course, but we are all in this together. Like, we don't have a choice. The pandemic is against all of us, and until a
mm,
vaccine is made, none of us are immune. So, you
yeah.
know, it's and lockdowns do wreak havoc on mental health. They just do. It's I know it's a way to keep people safe and it's the right
Mm,
thing to do, but at the same
mm,
time, we just don't have enough tools to help people with their mental health issues. We just don't.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think, if anything, I hope this year brings a spotlight to, you know, depression, anxiety, and the kind of physical effects it can have on a person. Um, you know, and poetry
Yeah.
is a very, very good way of like accessing those emotions, because so many people who read poems, especially who read this book, have said to me, oh, this poem made me feel a way that I never knew I could feel before. This poem
Mm,
unlocked something in me. This poem moved me. And that's the magic of poetry, right?
yes. Yeah, for sure. Well, there's so much in what you just said, Nikita. I'm just thinking, like, you know, right now, what you were saying about suffering, watching our loved ones suffer. You
Mm.
know, there's a lot of vulnerability and suffering that's being worn and shared in a way that it wasn't before this time.
Yeah.
You know, we're having the courage a bit more to say, no, I'm not okay. I feel fucking horrific. This
Yeah.
is shit.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it speaks to what a lot of poets do, which is have the courage to be vulnerable, you
Yeah.
know, and put their hearts on a page in a way that, you know, I think we should all do more of.
Yes.
And you know, one of the things you spoke to was being able to recognize more the language around our mental health. You know,
Yes.
these circumstances are affecting us. Are affecting us. You know, the context that we're in makes us suffer. So
Yes.
yes, for some that language might be depression, anxiety, but I think underneath it, it's also recognizing that we are suffering,
Mm.
however you describe that, whatever that looks like to be, you know. And of course, we're going to be suffering even more
Mm.
in this context where there's
Yes.
so much unfamiliarity, you know, there's a lot of disconnection, there's a lot of isolation.
Mm.
People around us are dying potentially,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
How do we manage that? Of course, we're going to be suffering. And what can we do in the face of that? Try
Mm.
and connect with each other more, be there for each other more, you know, be present, truly be there to listen wholeheartedly in an embodied way for each other. And poetry is a medium to do that.
Yes. Yeah. I think, if anything, this year we've all learned, whether poets or, you know, not poets, we've all learned to be better listeners. Whether we
Mm,
like it or not, we have to be better listeners, right? And it's listening to everyone. It's listening to people who are suffering. It's listening to guidelines. It's listening to what will keep us safe, but also
mm,
what will keep other people around us safe, right? And we have to listen. Like, we're out of choices, you know. We
mm,
don't get a choice on this one. Don't get a choice on a pandemic, unfortunately. Um it's not one of those things that you can go, I'm bored of the pandemic now, I'm just gonna I'm gonna do what I want.
yeah, Yeah, I think some people, the reality is some people are taking that, that some people are taking that approach to it, and there's obviously going to be greater harm
Yes.
as a result. And I think there is a lot of importance in us really taking individual responsibility and accountability about what we can do to keep ourselves and each other safe.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. If you haven't developed empathy yet, now is a good time to do so. And the best way to do so is poetry.
you know what? This is something that came up the other day as well. It's another conversation I'm having, but is empathy something we can teach? Can you cultivate and teach empathy? And what does that look like? Can we teach kids empathy? And I do think poetry is a medium to do that, because it offers something about being fully in the perspective of another. Like, you sit
Exactly.
with it and you feel their heart, you feel what they're feeling just by
Yeah.
reading or hearing their words.
Yeah.
And I think it is a medium of teaching empathy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
cultivating it,
And you're absolutely right. Like, and also when you go into, one of the beautiful things about going to a spoken word event or a performance event or a slam is that you are in a position, you don't have a choice. You have to listen, because that is how you honor the person on stage, right? When you go to a concert, you listen to the singer. When you go to watch a play, you watch the performers, but you listen to them. So it forces you to listen. It puts you in a position where you don't have a choice but to listen, and you've put yourself in that position because you have chosen to honor that person on the stage. um, and that is the magic of poetry, because through words, um, and through this, through this very visceral and powerful experience of being on stage and telling people what it's like to be in your shoes, you're teaching them empathy. And you're right, like it's
Yes,
a really good way to do it.
definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also pulling it back to how much how much the poet has to risk in doing that, because there's, like you were saying, there's something about listeners in some circumstances being forced to listen,
Yes.
and there might be a lot of discomfort in the truths that they're heard. It might encourage them to challenge some of their own beliefs,
Mhm.
or rigid worldviews, and potentially the poet is putting themselves at risk through that process,
Yes. Yeah.
and it takes a lot of courage, and I think there is room for conversations about how we can cultivate safety,
Mm.
um, and therapeutic containment. So it's maybe me using psychologist words here, but
No.
holding in poetry spaces, making them safer, making them more therapeutic, because there's
Yes.
so much vulnerability in it.
Mm.
If we're asking a poet to come and share their heart and their experiences in a room, how can we make sure that they're safe and everyone in the room around them also leaves feeling safe and held? These are conversations that I think we're still in the process of thinking about, and need to keep having.
Exactly. I think the only way that we're going to be able to get out of this year, by the skin of our teeth, is through listening and through continuing conversations, developing that empathy. And it's the same with like all art. Um, Artists, I was saying to somebody else the other day that poets, we are witnesses to history, and we're witnesses to history on an emotional level. You know, unlike historians who are witnesses to history in a completely different scale, and scientists who are witnesses to scientific history in a different. We are literally witnesses to emotional history, and it's a it's it's really hard, because you have to toe the line as well of like, the poem has to say what you want to say on both a personal and a public scale, right? Can't just be like, whenever I write, it's never just personal. It's also it's a very public act of putting your heart
Yes.
out onto a stage and telling people, here I am, like, here's my soul. um, be kind to it.
Yes. Oh, so much so. And there's in it, and maybe that some people don't necessarily choose this, but it's a very much a political act as well.
Mm.
know,
Mm.
that in what you choose to speak to and what you choose to give voice to and offering your truth
Yeah.
is in itself a political act. And I
Yeah.
think with that will come criticism, with that will come debate
Yeah.
on issues that don't you don't feel safe to debate necessarily. For example, my existence is not something that I want to debate as a queer Muslim person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but I think to love, to offer love and to offer intimacy with another woman, with another this woman, with another Muslim woman, is a political act, you know, in times. And I think, you know, that is important to name. And I think as poets, we are doing a lot of loving work, empathy work, but also political work. You know?
Precisely. I completely agree with you. I think what's really interesting and important to say as well is that a lot of us did not choose for our existence to be political. We didn't choose this, you know, it was politicized from before we were born. You know, to be queer, like, you know, as a queer brown woman, like queer South Asian women, it's been political to be a queer South Asian woman since before I was born. Like, I didn't choose it. The same way you didn't choose it, you know. It's like it's what was given to us. And for us not to be political about it is an impossibility, because whether we like it or not, the world will politicize it, whether we like it or not. And I think that's an important thing that people need to understand, is that a lot of us have identities that we didn't choose to be political. It wasn't our choice. We didn't go out there and go, I'm going to be uncomfortably political about this. It's just like, it's who we are. And that's a conversation I don't see happening as much as it should. You know?
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think the emotional resource and the emotional labor of having to do that when you don't want to necessarily, you know, or sometimes I think there's something about the poem is the poem and you wrote it at a time, and there's something safe about that as a piece to put out there. But to then engage in debate around it, you know, or political conversation that you don't want to, you don't consent to necessarily doing, and being pulled into that is incredibly emotionally exhausting. And laborious. And I think what you're saying to is really what you're speaking to is really important. And highlights that, you know.
I think there needs to be more conversations around why people think that being political is a bad thing when there's so many things that have been politicized before people were born. And they don't have choices in what is politicized, and, you know, whether their identities are politicized or not. Like, that's just been the way that it is for a very long time.
For sure. Are you finding that, I mean, I know it's only been out for the last 3 days, the book, but are you being pulled into conversations around pieces and, you know, or poems around it?
It's the first time that I've really written about being a queer South Asian girl. And it's just really interesting, because usually my poems tend to be quite universal in a lot of ways, because they talk about nature a lot, and they talk about, you know, space, and they talk about, you know, the experience of being, you know, a human. Sometimes a woman, but mostly a human, and self-love, and all of these are human experiences, so people can relate to them. It's a really strange experience to be this vulnerable and to talk about growing up as a, you know, queer South Asian girl, and what that was like being Kashmiri, and what that was like being from Delhi, and what that was like, and then coming to London as, you know, a young brown girl who has no idea what's going to happen next. So it's really, it was a very different experience, and I'm really glad the book is out there, because I really needed to write it, you know. But yeah, I am going to, we have 5 minutes, I think, so I'm going to open the
it's gone quickly. Okay.
I'm going to like open up to see if anyone has any questions about poetry, what we've been talking about, which would be really
I do just want to say, though, I can't wait to read it, because I haven't read it yet, and I do think you have such a skill, Nikita, in your, you know, with your older writing, that anybody can pick that up and find belonging. And I remember listening. It's so important, though, and I think I heard Mary Oliver speak about this on a podcast, that to find connection, for anybody to pick up your work and find a sense of belonging and importance, you know, and to see themselves in that piece is just, you know, a divine skill. So it's, you know, I think it's really, really important. And now you're offering something very different, and then there's a lot of courage in it. So I can't wait to read it. Honestly, I can't wait. I'm definitely going to read it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, my first ever novel, which will, of course, it was going to be a novel in verse, because I'm a poet. And it's called The Girl and the Goddess, for anyone who wants to have a look. And we also have got
Yes.
our first question. I'm so excited about this. I love questions. What role do you think poetry has in cultivating and building community right now? Yeah, especially in times of crisis.
Hold on, is that? Oh, that's Daniel. I know. That's a good question. That's a good question. Oh, I think it speaks to actually some of what I was just saying that you already do, Nikita, and I think that so many poets are working to do, which is through word, actually inviting a sense of belonging and connection,
Yeah.
and what we can do to write and speak to right now, especially in times of crisis, issues that are impacting certain communities, especially. I think for me, I can speak more specifically to a poem that I mentioned earlier that I wrote called "Decolonizing Distress,"
Mm.
which I did with the BBC for which is coming up for Mental Health Day. So I'm going to be sharing it again. But I think underneath that, I was trying to really give voice to how the medicalization of our distress and suffering particularly impacts and can harm people of color.
Yeah.
And I think in that, there's something in how people of color who have gone through the mental health system,
Mm.
there's a particular community that can come together and find connection. And there's a lot of people that have reached out to me about that poem in particular.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to offer that example because there's something in how we can use the medium of poetry to
Mm.
bring concepts that are potentially kept in the bubble of academia
Yeah.
to our communities, to offer a different form of connection, to name issues of harm in a way that that other mediums don't necessarily allow.
Yeah.
You know.
I completely agree. I was talking to somebody earlier on about how poetry is such it really depends heavily on community in a lot of ways, because the concept of community is so central to the concept of
Mm,
empathy and the human experience. And I was saying how National Poetry Day today, the Forward Arts Foundation, they've done such a brilliant job of taking like a really difficult year. National Poetry Day is usually it's such a lively day, everyone is doing something, we're all running around, we're all up to something. And this, even though this is a strange year and we're all like kind of stuck in lockdown or like self quarantine or isolation, we
mm,
took to the virtual world and still turned it into a really community based event. um,
mm,
and I think that was such a powerful thing to witness today, because it was such a warm day because of it. So I think poetry is brilliant because it brings people together like that. Look at what, National Poetry Day did for us. Oh,
definitely.
we have another question. Oh, I love this. So this is from Janie J. Starling, and it is: Nikita and Sanah, what was the first poem you ever wrote, and how long did it take you to share it? Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
You had to go first on this one. I'm trying to
Okay.
think, like, what was the first poem I ever
Okay. So,
wrote?
this is difficult. So I think the
Mm.
first poem I wrote was like so the first poem I wrote was the one which I complained about my mother, right? Because my mom she got angry at me because I had like dropped a glass and I'd smashed it, and like she was really really upset, and like I got chappal for that. Because my mom was like, yeah. Yeah, I got like spanks because of course I broke one of my favorite glasses, and I was really
Oh.
mad. I was really mad. So like I sat down and I wrote this poem, where I was like, my mother is so mean. I was like 8 or something. I was like, my mother is so mean. She hasn't even seen, or something silly like that.
Bars.
And so I never shared that with anyone, because I think I was terrified that I would get more chappal and more spanks if anyone ever saw it. Um, but
I still feel like that about my poetry if my mum finds it.
right, right. I never shared that. But what about you?
Oh, that sounds beautiful. I find it really hard to remember the first poem. I think the first I can remember, I'm not sure if if it was the first one, um, was writing for a female friend at the time who I hadn't actually then realized that it was an infatuation because I didn't have the language then to even understand my sexuality.
Yeah.
But I think I was low key trying to like express my feeling for her in a way that was like, you know, that she could feel a real sense of connection with, but not, you know, not explicitly naming it as sexual. So it
Yeah.
was just like a low key, like subtly threaded through the poem. Now I look back on it. But I think I was like 13
Wow.
at school. Yeah. So yeah, using poetry as a medium of romanticism
Yeah.
early on,
I
which I'm
love
sure we all
that.
have experience of doing.
And did you share that? Did you share that with her?
I did share, yeah, I did share it with her. Yeah, she really, really, yeah, she really liked it.
Oh, that's
Um, I think that's how I spent a lot of my early years as using poetry, is sharing it in relationships.
yeah.
Never wider than that. And it was only in my 20s that I had the courage to go beyond that, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I feel you on that because I think like I did that thing for a long time as a young queer girl because I related so much to the story is I used to change the pronouns in my poems to feel safer. Um,
mm,
I used to because they were all to girls, so I would go, he and
mm,
his instead of she and hers. Um,
mm,
and it was a form of protection. And I used to hate myself for doing that. But at the same time,
mm,
I was really scared that someone would find it and then what would
mm,
happen. And the scary part was I didn't know what would happen. It was just, and then what would happen? Log kya kahenge?
mm,
Like what would people
mm.
say? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that definitely resonates for me. Definitely resonates for me. The amount of time, like, you know, I remember back in the day, this is maybe slightly veering off poetry, but I had my ex-girlfriend's name saved as a man's name in my phone and constantly having to find mediums of protection and
Yeah.
self-protection, whether that be through explicitly in the poem
Yeah.
or in other ways, you know. But I think, yeah, it definitely speaks to me.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, we have, I think we can do one more question, and it's from our Sim. It's from Sim
Oh,
Sandhu,
hey, Sim.
who is the editor on Slam, and she is brilliant.
She's
So
amazing.
she just asked, "What's a recent poem about the shit show that is 2020 that you would have loved to add to Slam?" Wow. Yeah. I think there have been like some really great poems which have come out.
Mm,
And I have one of them open over here actually. Um, so I'm writing a book of, response poems to the global pandemic. But there was
mm.
one that I read that I was just like floored by, and it was Imtiaz Dharkar's What We Did Not Know. And
Oh,
it is
I
just
love her.
it is
I
such
haven't
a
heard that poem.
just it's beautiful. It's from Carol Ann Duffy's project, Right Where We Are Now, I think that's what it's called. And
Mm,
the
mm,
poem basically is about, sharing the last afternoon with a friend before you knew that, there was a crisis that was about to happen. So it might be the last time you see that friend in a very long time. And there's so much, it's such a beautiful poem, that just it perfectly captures how it feels like to have thought about that last moment that you saw someone you loved and you don't know when you're going to see them again. You know?
mm.
And I really, really wish that we could have included this on Slam because it's just such a beautiful poem and it perfectly encapsulates how 2020 feels to a lot of us, the regrets. So yeah,
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I need to read it. I haven't read it, but
yeah.
I love her. I love her work. I love her work. I definitely will check it out.
Oh, she's
Um,
amazing.
she is amazing. Yeah, I shared a lineup with her once, and I like couldn't speak because I was just like, how am I on a lineup with Imtiaz Darka? I was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
she's so incredible, and just a real inspiration for me. But
yeah,
yeah, I can't wait to read that.
yeah.
You know, I'm just thinking about what poem is really speaking or calling to me at the moment in this time. And there's something that I heard on, I don't know if you've heard Poetry Unbound, the podcast by
Yes, yeah.
Patrick Otoma on Being. Yeah, you have. Yeah, it's amazing. But they just dropped the new On Being like as a full episode, which is like got
Wow.
cuts of the new season in it. And I really recommend it to everybody. But there's a poem in it by Diruba Ahmed. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, and it's called Phase One. And it's all about self-forgiveness.
Mm.
Um, you know, and it kind of, when you first hear it, it sounds like she's speaking to the details of flaws in a partner,
Oh,
but
wow.
it's actually her, you know, the intimacy of it, you know, you quickly discover it's her speaking to herself. But there's something in that for me at the moment where we are in these times of confronting death, loss, suffering, where self-forgiveness feels so important and
Yes.
compassion feels so important.
Yeah.
And where does it start? How can we extend that to each other if we can't offer it to ourselves? And
Yeah.
I think that's the real place of beginning, is being able to say, I forgive you, I accept you as you are and whatever is here right now,
Yeah.
you know, and then being able to offer that to others. And I think that poem really demonstrates that for me right now.
Yeah. Kind to
So yeah,
ourselves. Yeah.
yeah, it's so important.
That's a beautiful note to like close up the evening on, actually, how to be kind to ourselves and being good to ourselves. And Sana, thank you so much for joining me on the Waterstones account to do this beautiful conversation, which I'm going to sit with and think a lot about.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, me too. I love sharing space with you, and I love the conversations that we have. And yeah, it's just a real blessing to be here with everyone and share this space. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
thank you everyone who joined us. This will be saved onto the Waterstones account. Thank you so much to Waterstones for giving us the space to join
yes,
together
thank you,
to do this.
Waterstones.
And the book is Slam. You're going to want to hear this. You will be able to find that on the Waterstones website. And I highly recommend getting the audiobook as well. So thank you so much. This has been lovely. Thank you, Sana. And I'll see
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thanks, Nikita. Bye.